fact that I don't see a single character up there that looks like they're from my community, or someone who looks like me. I often see the same type of character dominate our media nowadays. Usually, they're white and male, and to a lesser extent, but also very present, white and female. It's such a rarity to see the faces of people from marginalized communities, such as the Native American community or the South Asian community, presented up on the big screen or in the books that we read daily. And this problem of representation of people of color, or POC, in the media, it's sustained for generations with no set solution. And while it plagues all communities of color, I believe that this problem is most harmful as it targets people who are in the developing ages of around 5 to 13. And personally, as a 17-year-old who's towards the end of this age spectrum, I had never really seen someone in the media that looked like me until only very recently. And this is extremely concerning, unless, of course, you count all of the comparisons of my child self to Dora the Explorer. The only character that somewhat represented me when I was growing up was Dora. And I'll tell you, she's a real one for that. But the problem is I'm not even Hispanic. So how could I truly connect with her when our cultures and our ethnicities were different, even though we looked somewhat similar? And not seeing a single character like me that could also advocate for my cultural experiences, it really created this impressionable and lasting feeling on younger me. And that made me think that white characters were inherently better than brown or black characters just because white characters were represented more, and just because they were the normal. And so if I didn't grow up with an ample amount of POC representation in the media, just imagine how many others haven't. And imagine how many future generations to come won't, unless we make a change. And this idea of representation, it really focuses on how the media portrays various communities and groups, one being the POC community. And they do this by focusing on the three lenses of ethnicity, race, and culture. But for me, however, this definition was a bit different. This definition was being able to see a character on screen or in the book that I was reading that I could really connect to. And this definition for me was seeing diversity through the characters or the cast. Because nobody really wants to see a homogeneous set of characters that have all had the same upbringings or that have had similar experiences. Because then they'll be left wondering what I used to question when I was growing up. Are white characters and people inherently better due to the copious amounts of representation they receive? And this importance of POC characters is not to just exist on that screen. It's not to just stand there and look pretty, but it allows this intimate connection to form between the viewer or the reader and the character. A study done by the Annenberg Initiative found that 71% of all speaking characters were white. It also found that 20 out of the top 100 films in America didn't include a single black character. And 43 of these films had no Latinx characters, 37 were devoid of Asian characters, and 94 out of 100 of these films, they had not one single Native American character. And what's worse about these horrifying statistics is that when we look at these on a deeper level, we'll see that these numbers, they also include walking stereotypes, and they also include characters who solely have background or supporting roles. One constant example of bad POC representation I've seen in the media, and you might have realized that you've seen it too, is the character stereotype of a Muslim woman taking off her hijab for a man. In the popular Spanish show Elite on Netflix, there's one character that fits this stereotype. Her name is Nadia Shana. After having to remove her hijab due to her private school's strict rules, she continues to wear it outside of school, but then she stops wearing it when she develops a relationship with this white guy. And the fact that she took this off partially for a guy who pretty much only found her beautiful with her hair out, it's incredibly repulsive, and it's really concerning too. And personally, I would have had no problem if this decision to take off her hijab was solely hers. But it wasn't. There were so many outside influences, such as the pressure of this guy on her to take off her hijab, that made her make this decision. And it's not okay that we're allowing the media to do this, and we're allowing the media to rip apart such a big part of our identity away. And because of this, we're letting the media portray Nadia as a weak young woman and as bad representation of the Muslim community, especially for young Muslim girls who need a role model, but unfortunately, they can't really look up to Nadia anymore. And by doing this, Netflix reiterates this horrible trope that Hollywood just squeezes the life out of. And so right now, I should see alarm bells ringing off in your head, because this is a media that your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren, I think you get where I'm heading at, but this is a media that we're allowing future generations to consume if we don't change the media industry completely, and if we don't push to improve this POC representation. And especially in a world that's dominated by white characters, there's not really any source of empowerment for me, for you, and for us. And growing young adults, they aren't really able to see themselves accurately portrayed on the media. But, however, good news is that there are several ways for you to be the change in this generation. Just by donating or supporting POC creators' work is an amazing start for the fact that it's the most accessible to you and for you to do. Or just going to see a film by a POC character or reading a book by a POC creator, it really helps this problem of the lack of POC representation. And that's because we know that POC creators, they're much more likely than their white counterparts to create media that has ample amount of POC representation. A great example of this pattern is Mindy Kaling. She played Kelly Kapoor on the hit show The Office, and she's now also the screenwriter and the director of the show Never Have I Ever. And in this show, she features Devi, a South Asian main character, but she also features characters that are hailing from several other communities, like the African American community and the East Asian community. And not only is Never Have I Ever Kaling's only creation, but she also created a show on HBO Max called The Sex Lives of College Girls, where we continue to see this pattern, that she's creating this diverse cast within her shows. Another great example of POC representation is the TV show Kim's Convenience. And this show, it started off as a book written by Ins Choi, and it follows an East Asian family's fictional lives. And what I really love about this show is that not only is the main cast POC based, but again, there are supporting characters and other main characters that are coming from so many diverse backgrounds and so many diverse communities. And with this pattern, we continually see that POC creators, they're continuing to create media that allows for an ample amount of POC representation. And another way to be the change is to take matters into your own hands and to strive to add more POC representation in the media that you create, even if it's just something as small as a short story assignment for English class. Because, for example, when I write, I always include POC characters because I understand the lack of it that's so severe nowadays. And anything I can do to help this malnourishment, I'll do, because again, I understand the background of this problem. Another example is a screenplay that I've written and I'm casting for currently. This screenplay features the main character whose name is Raylia, and she's a 17-year-old Black and Asian teenager. In other pieces, I've included Black, Asian, and Indigenous characters. And what's important that we do as creators specifically is that we find new ways to improve the standard of representation in our pieces. The reason why I personally strive to represent the POC community is that I know that representation, it's incredibly important for children, teenagers, and honestly, even adults. And I never had that much representation growing up. But now that I write, I can actually help solve this problem through the media that I create. And I'm only one of a large number of writers out there that are striving for the equal and accurate representation of people of color in the media. And what I'm starting to find is that with more people of color that are joining media as a workforce and as an industry, we're gonna start seeing more TV shows and books that have casts full of people of color. And this idea of representation, it's so important because we're able to empathize with each other and we're able to learn more about different cultures through this accurate representation. And this allows us to help extend our cultural roots, and it helps us learn more of what the world has to offer, instead of really sheltering in what we've already been previously exposed to. And increasing this representation, it would decrease the amount of insecurity that we see among generations. And this increase in representation, it prevents Hollywood from having the power to dictate how important or unimportant my culture and your culture is to society. And this new world that I'm working towards, and that you should be working towards too as well, is a world of media that empowers the POC community through our creations. So next time you consume any piece of media, whether that's a book, a TV show, a movie, or even a TED Talk, what's important is that you notice and analyze the standard of representation that this piece of media portrays. Because if I had this type of representation growing up, so much would have changed for me. I would have had people in the media that I could look up to and that I could relate to. And this, honestly, growing up, this probably would have made me feel more accepted into my own community. And this is the world that I hoped to have grown up in. A world where my writing and other people's writing has increased the amount of POC representation in the media. And as a writer, I look forward to helping create this world. Thank you.